Is it wrong for pastors and people who are in spiritual endeavors to also strive for the outcome of economic growth?
It's not wrong. I want to destroy the false belief that you cannot have life transformation, helping people grow and change, and also buy a house and have a car, wanting to provide for your family.
People who are successful, they come to me and say, I'm lost. I'm like, why are you lost? You're at the pinnacle, your career, wife's amazing, your kids growing. They are still finding life meaningless.
Success is not the same as purpose. Without purpose, success is empty.
You're listening to the Mind Shift podcast. My name is Erwin McManus, and I'm here with my dad, Erwin McManus. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here. We are in Kuala Lumpur in KL, Malaysia. It is hot and humid, but we're here with our great friend, Kevin Liu. Now, Kevin, this is video and audio, so if you nod, we will not hear you on the audio. So for everyone's listening, Kevin just gave the most humble bow.
He bowed.
And, it's good to have you.
Thank you, Erwin.
And it's good to be together. And I know that you're not used to calling me Erwin, but I appreciate that. But I did tell you could call me Chef if you needed to.
I think Chef is way easier.
So on the take before this, he said, "It's good to see you, Chef."
Yeah, it's good to see you, Chef.
Okay, so we're here in your backyard, which is so amazing. Thanks for having us.
Oh, it's my honor to have you.
How's the weather looking this week?
Weather changed a lot.
Weather changes a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the last couple of years.
How are we
It's supposed to be dry season,
Okay.
but it's been raining.
It's been raining.
Yeah.
So the thing about the rain here is that the first time that I ever came to it was the second time I came to KL.
Uh-huh.
You invited me to speak,
Yep.
which I was very honored and very nervous.
Right.
And you have this beautiful, amazing building, which is right next door.
Yeah.
So, and you have like a coffee shop, you have a Japanese restaurant here, and you have, it's like, there's this beautiful space. And everyone's getting prepared for a conference, which is coming up in the next few days, which is why we're recording this podcast. We're out here, and you had me speak.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think it was the first time I really had ever been invited anywhere to speak. And it was such an honor. And I went up, and in the first 30 seconds, like I think I prayed and then said amen, and then a thunderstorm happened.
Yes.
And your roof it's
Aluminum.
not insulated. It's made out of
that was the biggest mistake of my life.
whatever. what was the biggest
What did
mistake?
you use to build your...
No, because when we designed the building,
Okay.
they told us that there's this new material to be put underneath the roof that is the best for repelling heat, which is true.
Right.
But we just forgotten about the sound bit. So that's why when you were speaking,
It was like
Jake,
Jake Goss was playing drums on the entire building.
yeah,
And
right on top of us.
Right on top. Like it was. Back me up here, Dad. That was one of the loudest.
I don't think I've ever heard a louder room in my life. And I'm sitting
And
here
it's not a
watching-
little room. It's a big room.
It's a big room. And by the way, this is the space is called The Collective.
Yep.
And it's a community that Kevin founded how many years ago?
23.
23 years ago. But that room that day was so loud I couldn't even hear myself think. And I'm sitting watching Aaron, who was still, working on developing his communication chops
We're still working.
in probably the most difficult environment to give a talk.
It was collectively, if I could say so, the most terrifying thing I've ever. I think I said amen and then said, "Why God?" out loud on the mic, and it just proceeded to rain and pour for the next little bit. But so now
you just plowed through. You just kept going.
But I have to say that was, to some of our people, that was still one of the most memorable talk they've ever heard in their whole life.
they're like, little white boy.
No,
Dealt with the rain.
Not just that, but they appreciated your honesty and how authentic when you speak. So it really meant a lot to them.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
That's
So
not.
let it rain.
Okay, so we're here in your backyard and we're preparing for conference and we're having this amazing conversation in the car talking about leadership, and it was a pretty intimate conversation.
Yeah.
That was special.
So what do we want to talk? And then we got here and we're sitting outside the office and I'm sitting in the backseat with your amazing wife, Esther, and I look at her and I said, "This is what always happens. We're about to film the pod, but we just did the pod in the car. So what should we talk about now?"
Well, I actually think it was a good conversation because Kevin's a pastor. I've been a pastor. You've been a pastor. And a lot of times people don't realize that probably the most complicated space in which to lead is in any volunteer organization or community. Because when you run a company, which I have, you have employees and they're paid, and there's a different dynamic, a different relationship. And also, no matter how important that job is, it's not the totality of their life.
Right.
They can lose that job and still have their life.
Yes.
But when you work at a church, not only is that person an employee, but that they are a part of that community.
Mm-hmm.
And you're also like the person of greatest spiritual influence in their life. And you're trying to develop leaders, and you're also having to be a boss.
Yeah.
So if you have to transition someone off,
Yeah.
you're not just jeopardizing their job. Now they have to figure out, are they still a part of this community?
Mm-hmm.
Are you still the spiritual voice in their life?
Uh-huh.
And there can be a feeling where you lose everything. And not only that, but you're also leading volunteers dominantly.
Yeah.
Churches can't happen without volunteers. And so the real leadership nuance isn't how do you lead your paid staff. It's how do you lead hundreds, if not thousands of volunteers in a common movement when there's no financial incentive at all.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people underestimate the incredible leadership skills that a person in your role has to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really not easy to navigate that, because in our role, people gives us the biggest nightmare, but people are also the ones that give us the biggest joy in our lives when you see them doing well. So to navigate through that, because when we transition them out, see, we have to use the word transition. It really, like, do they stay? What happens to the family and the children? So it's a way more complicated equation than just, firing someone from our workplace.
And I remember probably over 30 years ago, a business expert was telling us, do not become friends with your employees. And I remember thinking to myself, well, that might be true in any arena or domain except the church.
Yeah.
Because if you're not friends with your employees, I don't know if you really have community in some sense. And or at least you should care about your employees at a deep level. And a lot of times you end up hiring the people that you're friends with and that you have a close relationship with. But a lot of times someone who's perfectly qualified to be a good friend is perfectly unqualified to be a good employee. Yeah. And that mistake can happen over and over again, right? You go, this is the most incredible human being in the world. I'm going to put him over this. And then really not 6 months or 3 months, but 3 minutes later, you realize they don't have the skills and competencies to do that job. And so I think that, that's a part of the dynamic
Of leadership in the church.
of leadership. Yeah.
I'm so amazed at the job you guys do in it, because we were sitting in the car and you were asking him about a specific situation, and I am so maybe American or maybe just unwise, but I'm biting at all I want to do is just jump in this conversation and respond to a specific scenario or give another option. But how is it taken? You have been in church ministry for 20, 30 years?
Yeah, 30.
And then you would be 40 years now?
Maybe a century or two.
Was there a moment in leadership, whether it was in church or outside of church in the different businesses, where you felt more settled and calm about making decisions when it came to these dynamics with hiring and firing, or how to build a team or community?
I think right at the start, the real challenge is really to have a good understanding. I came from a background where no one should leave the team. Anyone that signs up to work for you, they are going to be here for life. And so I came from that mindset, and the first staff that left the team was horrible, because I thought you wanted to do this for the rest of your life. That's why we talk about this, right? And we promise each other. and then one after another. But over time, when I have been through more experiences and hopefully more mature, I realized that it's not true. People also should have the liberty to choose in the different seasons of their life to do different things. And I guess once you have to deal with it more times enough, you're kind of like more settled. Like, oh, somebody's moving on. As long as it's healthy, it's good, and we have a good connection still, I'm fine. I can't say 100% I'm perfect now, but I definitely have been better, so much better than when I started out. When the first staff left, that was heartbreaking.
Well, I think what happens early on is that when you have someone who decides that they don't want to be on the team anymore, you feel like a complete failure.
Oh, yes.
Right? It's not even about the job or something very specific. It's, I failed these people. I'm not a good leader. If I were exactly who I should be, they would never want to leave. But if you flip it the other way around, I mean, what a prison sentence to say to someone, you're supposed to be here all of your life.
Yes, yes.
And, I mean, that's a little bit unhealthy.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, I think one of the most important things, not just in leadership and in an organization, but also in life, is to realize that you're in people's lives sometimes for a season.
Yeah.
And people are in your life for a season, and that's not bad. That's actually a healthier model to go, maybe I'm the right voice in someone's life, the right influence in someone's life for right now, but as they change and grow, they may need a different voice and a different person. In fact, it made me think, and I know you guys probably don't follow like college basketball from the States, but there's a great team called Kentucky, and they had an iconic coach named Calipari, and he just left Kentucky, I think after over 20 years, and he went to a school called Arkansas. And the reason I know that is because Mariah, who's my daughter, her husband Jake, went to Arkansas, so all things Arkansas are important. But Calipari said before he left, I felt it was time for Kentucky to have a new voice.
Right.
He said the fans needed a new voice, the players needed a new voice, the school needed a new voice.
Yeah.
And what's ironic is that he was an old voice for Kentucky, but he's a new voice for Arkansas. And I think sometimes the healthiest thing in life is to realize that your voice is really important in people's seasons, but it's not necessarily the voice is supposed to be there for a lifetime.
I think it's important to like just keep hearing and learning this, because when the rubber meets the road and you are in that situation, you feel like a super failure. Like, I should have thought about this and I didn't do so well.
Yeah, so if you flip it, because I think you guys are from the perspective that you've had so many people come and go. And we made this joke yesterday at lunch that if you counted all of the people who've left Mosaic, you would have the biggest church in the world.
Yeah.
Because just the reality is that so many people have come through Mosaic's doors, the doors that you open.
Even just come through Los Angeles doors.
Yeah.
And Los Angeles has this massive turnover of people.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we for years would have like an 80% turnover, because that's how many people would come to LA, then leave LA.
Yeah.
They came to be actors or artists or, you know, directors or producers, and they left a year later to go back home. So we've had just to be aware of the massive turnover of our city, of our culture.
Yeah.
But, you know, one of the things with leaving well that I think is really important is a lot of people only have two internal narratives.
Okay.
They're either the hero or the victim.
Yep.
And when they leave a job, when you apply this, it's almost as if you have to act like you never liked the job or like the people. And to create a hero story, you have to make the job the villain.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important to leave well. You should remember every reason why you loved that job when you loved it.
Yeah.
And everything that people have invested in you and they've poured into your life.
Yeah.
I think the way you leave well is you leave with gratitude.
Yes. That's true. Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just that simple. And when you leave ungrateful, you always have to create a villain.
Yeah.
And I don't know, have you ever been fired or had to leave a job?
No, but I left a job. Well, I left to pioneer this.
Right.
And
did you leave well?
I thought I did, but I didn't think it panned out that way on the other side. but I knew that there will be reactions because I chose to leave. I knew there'd be reactions on the other side. So I made sure that we respond well. And no matter how nicely I want to put it, it will always be painful.
Well, you can't leave well from a culture that says you should never leave.
Yes, that's true.
And you were in a culture that said you should never leave.
Yeah.
So there is never going to be a win
No.
on your side.
No.
So you have to just win by being honorable on your end.
Yeah. That was what I had to do. And so I have to just take it all in, like with all the accusations and things that I didn't like to hear. But I don't know where I learned that from. I just have to make sure that I do my new work well, keep my mouth shut, just don't react. And hopefully I can respond as honorably as possible. So that
You
was
just named everything I struggle with.
yeah, I can only say I did that one time.
But I did that one time.
But not for because I was very respectful of my previous leader, and I appreciated him a lot. So there wasn't much in me that like I want to say something bad about him, because there was none really.
Right.
So that kind of like make it easier. But I think, chef, when you talk about the person that's leaving, we talk about they only have two internal narratives. But how about the person that's being left, like us? That's a whole different thing altogether.
Right, and then we become the victims too many times.
Yeah,
You know,
and have to take the high road.
yeah, I'm not like you. I have been fired. And,
I've been fired.
what?
I've been fired too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was fired. I was married. Aaron was a baby, so I had a wife and a son. And my boss said to me that your gifts and talents are different than we thought when we hired you. And he said, I feel this job is beneath your gifts and talents, and that you've grown beyond this role. And I called my brother and I said, my boss just shared all these interesting things. And my brother said, Erwin, that's how Christians fire.
Oops. Ouch.
And it just all sunk in that moment. And I went back and confirmed I had been, relieved of duty, and was being transitioned out. And I had a very interesting choice to make, because I had other key leaders call me and say, hey, we heard that you've been let go and that you're transitioning off the staff. And if this is true, let us know, and we will fire your boss and give you his job.
Wow.
And that was the board.
Right.
And I remember, I was young. I was probably 31, 32 years old. And I don't know why, but I had this insight, this moment. I said, why would I have you punish my boss for having to do something I should have done? And I don't believe, because my view of God and faith is, like I said, I don't believe I could lose a job I wasn't supposed to give up. And so I think that God was speaking to me, telling me to move on. I didn't have the courage to do it. So he had to have him do it for me.
Right.
And,
Wow.
And so I made my decision. I wanted to be like the best transitional employee in the world. And what's crazy is the transition took a year, not from my end, but from his end. Because and at the end of my time, at the last week, they had a major conference, and the boss who fired me asked me to be the keynote speaker to give the visionary message for the whole organization. And I thought, in that transition, I earned so much trust from him that he knew I wouldn't get on that stage and say something negative. And for me, that's one of the most meaningful, unexpected compliments of my life. I can trust you even though I fired you. And yeah, but it was painful.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy.
I do think there's two types of people in those situations. They're like ghosts or grown-ups. And because we have amazing people who've come through Mosaic and our teams, even people who worked on our business staffs, and we talk about them in such like high regard. Like these guys, like we're legends, and you talk about them like they were fallen soldiers in a long last battle, like Lawrence Fudge, who we love so much. We have so many nicknames for that man. And then there's people who just haunt us. There's people who leave and then never leave because they just keep talking or chirping or there's always these things. And so as I always find it really interesting when people leave negatively, because I'm like, why would you ever want us to think negative of you, or do you think of negatively of us? Why couldn't we just move on and move forward? But it doesn't seem to be that simple.
I think people want to leave that way to justify that their leaving was right,
Yes.
so that you know that you are wrong. That's why I'm leaving.
Do you think there's my favorite thing, and this is a dark one, is is when you know they regret leaving, and you hear it, but they're too proud to come back,
Yeah.
right? Which I always find really interesting as well. Like the ego's too predominant or too heavy. But when it comes to people who okay, do you think it's the organization's fault, or do you think it's the individual's fault? Because I do think I've been a part of organizations where they never wanted me to leave. And then I said, hey, I'm moving back to LA to go be with my dad. And the main guy was cool with it, but his guys around him were really not okay with it. And they expected me to be a lifer. And so is there like a false sense of this like romanticizing that, you know, we fall in love with this organization, or, you know, or they have an impact on my life, and now I have to be their indentured servant for all of time. Is it that as well? Do you think it's on the organizational side? Or how do we adjust that? Is that a fair question?
Yeah, it's a fair question. I mean, you can't answer that question without acknowledging that as much as we love Jesus and we love the church, there's a lot of dysfunction inside of the organizational structure of the church. And
Walk
the
us through the
community of the
spoons.
church. What?
Walk us through the spoons. Process, essence.
Yeah, I was talking about like one of the challenges sometimes.
No, tell him the story.
Okay, we were having breakfast this morning, and I grabbing silverware and trying to help Aaron like understand, because he made a statement that's a little challenging of a statement, because I just think, he said, I think that every church, whether it means to or not, in some small way could be a cult.
I said all organized religion, whether it means to or not, has even churches has some elements where it's cultish behavior.
And because of that idea of if you leave, there's something wrong with you. You know, I think any system that doesn't let people leave in a healthy way is unhealthy.
Wow. Yep.
And you have to celebrate people coming because they came into your life and needed the space you created. And you have to be able to celebrate people leaving when they need a different space or a different experience in life. And you can't let that control you. But I was talking about one of the reasons sometimes we take on the wrong essence. And this is like a broader leadership thing too.
It was essence, process.
Is that I put process on top, and then outcomes up top, process on the left, and essence on the right. And a lot of times we want a person's outcome. Let's move into the business world. You go on Instagram, you see all these guys driving Lamborghinis and having yachts and having airplanes and having, you know, all the women and everything like that. So then the guy goes, I want those outcomes.
Yeah.
And so what they end up doing is going, okay, the guy's teaching, quote, his process. This is how you can get rich.
Yeah.
Here's how you invest in real estate. Here's how you do this multi-level marketing. But what you're actually adopting is also their essence,
Right.
which is manipulation, performance, seediness, a lack of character, a lack of ethics. And so you end up aspiring for someone's outcome, and you take their essence with you. And you think you've only adapted their process, but you've actually adapted their essence. And this happens in church life too, when someone sees, oh, this guy's preaching. He has thousands of people listening to him. I want that outcome. But I can tell he's manipulative and maybe corrupt and maybe disingenuous on stage. But if that's what it takes, then I'll go ahead and take on that essence too.
Yeah.
And then you take on all the systems and processes. And one of the challenges sometimes is going, people with bad essence can actually have some insight on process that you need. And you have to be careful as you learn processes not to absorb essence.
Wow.
And, you know, so as you, and so you have to be careful, because if the outcome is completely self-indulgent, the essence is going to be completely self-indulgent. That's why when someone says, I can teach you how to be rich, you're going to get bad essence because it's a bad outcome.
Yeah.
That was a lot of the inspiration around the arena. and the
Yes.
mastermind was
It-
we were part of amazing groups, and I don't think the main guys weren't bad, but they it was the wrong essence.
Yeah, and they would have, sometimes different groups would bring me in to try to bring a 30-minute infusion of essence,
Right.
when over 3 days the essence is so shady and
Yeah.
dark. I'm going, I can't change your essence with a 30-minute talk.
No.
You know, but everybody comes from the process to achieve the outcomes.
Yeah.
And that's why wealth, power, fame is, all those are great secondary outcomes. They're terrible goals and intentions. You know, and so the person whose outcome goal is, I want to be rich, will always have a bad essence, even if they have a good process.
Yeah.
And when a person says, no, I want to have purpose and intention in my life, and if out of that comes, well, fame or wealth or influence or stuff, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, who doesn't want wonderful benefits from living a good life or a beautiful life?
Yeah.
But they can't be your intention, your purpose. That's what we talked about. That's what the spoons drove us to.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Isn't that good? That's what he does at breakfast.
I should be there.
You should come.
I'm coming for breakfast tomorrow.
The breakfast today was early. Come to breakfast tomorrow. Okay, I do have a question. Desired outcomes. So moving back a little bit into church, because you are also a phenomenal artist,
Yep.
Yes, you are.
and you've had other business ventures.
Yeah.
You. I know you had a shoe company. Do you still do shoes? Sometimes.
Kinda.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
You dabble. You entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
You're
And-
always creating something new.
Always creating
Yeah.
something new.
Yeah.
And
Trying.
then you are always. We had a fight last night. I was like, no more new things.
No,
He's like, you did this with me, and
he
I said,
he gave me an open door to a new idea,
Uh-huh.
and I realized that he used to own the idea phrase. By the time I was going to bed, I was already moving toward implementation.
Well, we talked about a problem set, but this ties into the whole question. So let me ask
Yeah.
the question, and then we'll go into it.
Yeah.
Basically, the outcome for pastors is really just purpose and people's lives being changed. The economy for pastors is really life change
Yeah.
for humans,
Yeah.
but that's not really always a quantifiable thing in like monetarily.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have great people who tend to have phenomenal, maybe like spiritual outcomes, but nowhere to like land and build on financially. And there's massive problems in the church with money and
Yeah.
being able to provide for families and or buy buildings for church and just advance things. So how do you do both? Is it possible? Can you do it well?
Yeah, I want to say you're an incredible artist, and when we first started talking about your art,
Yeah.
I told you you're just way undercharging
Oh yeah.
for your art.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, I was mad at you. Like, you
Yeah,
know,
you
like
did.
start valuing the gifts that God has given you, and
Yeah.
stop undervaluing it, and to me, being dismissive of what God has placed inside of you. And
I'm
think
going to ask
that-
my question again.
Yeah.
Because you just skipped it again. I don't want him to answer.
I thought it was answering it.
No, you just complimented him.
It's because our frequencies are. Go ahead. Ask the question again, and I'll try to answer it.
What was the question?
The question was, can you make life change your economy and still,
No,
no? Okay.
No.
that wasn't it. That's how I know you weren't answering the question.
It was the question in my head.
Is it wrong for pastors and people who are in spiritual endeavors to also strive for the outcome of economic growth?
It's not wrong, and I was getting to that. You see, you ruined my digressive approach towards an answer, and I want to destroy the false belief that you cannot have as your intention life transformation, helping people grow and change, and also wanting to provide for your family and buy a house
Yeah.
and have a car and have your children have clothes to go to school, because there's this almost like this mythology that says you can't be sincere in wanting to give your life to serve people
Yeah.
if you also want to pay the bills.
Yeah.
And I always struggled with being like monastic. I thought I'm supposed to have nothing as proof that I'm sincere.
Yeah.
You know what I discovered, Kev, is that even when you have nothing, people will still question your insincerity
Yeah.
if they aren't trustworthy. What I've come to realize is that trustworthy people give trust and untrustworthy people do not give trust.
Yeah.
And so you can't spend your whole life being a servant to people who aren't trustworthy because they won't trust you.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of what I have to do with pastors is go, I know you are really sincere. You really want to see people's lives change. You need to also provide for your family. You need to also give yourself permission to buy a house if that's within your capacity to, to not feel guilty that you have some things. And then, what I hope is that then people are like incredibly healthy, so they're not using things to prove their value and worth.
I want Kevin to answer.
Yeah. What do you think, Kev?
And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah. Actually, it was during one of the arena sessions that I heard from you, and not everything is like right or wrong, right? Can it be good or bad? And I feel for where my position is, I seem to always trade in a currency of humility. It just have to be humble, right? No matter what you do. So when I couldn't price my paintings higher, it's because it feels like, the economy that I'm in, if I'm humble, then I'm doing a good thing, regardless of the outcome of the painting or how much after that they sell. They make actually more money than me selling it to them in the first place, right?
Right. Somebody's going to make money on your gift.
Yeah. And then you beat yourself up, but then you have that mindset in the first place that I should be humble. So if you're humble, you fix all the problems in life, but you don't. Humility can't buy a house. You don't go to, Honda and say, I'm humble. Can you give me a humble price for your Civic, Honda Civic? But so it's a big internal struggle on the inside, like constantly battling with myself. So yeah, to answer that question, I think the in-between is that humility part that is confusing. It's not just the monetary reward after. We still want to change lives. Every pastor, leader would love to change lives. But just that we get a lot more complicated when we just trade in humility. I wish humility is a Bitcoin. I'm sorry.
Humility is a Bitcoin? That'd be a great.
Yeah.
That'd be a great.
I'll have a lot of Bitcoins,
Yeah. I think sometimes we confuse humility with self-loathing, or a lack of self-worth. And because recently I was talking about how you can't really be humble until you know your power.
Oh yeah, I remember that one. Yep.
And I think it's the same way. You can't truly be humble if you don't know your worth. Because if you don't know your worth, it's not humility. It's almost like a self-loathing or lack of self-worth.
Yeah.
When you know your worth and then you don't choose to be arrogant, but you choose to be humble, that's when it's powerful.
Yes.
And by the way, I'm just going to say this. You are genuinely one of the most humble people I know. And I'll fly across the world for you because of who you are as a human being. And so, there's always going to be someone who's pretending to care about people to create wealth. That's just the way the world runs.
Yeah.
That's true. But to me, they're the exception. They're not the norm. The norm are thousands and tens of thousands of people around the world serving humanity, trying to make the world better, giving up so many of their own personal opportunities for just betterment in life. And no one ever knows their name.
Yeah.
And I think that's the problem, is the people who are truly, humble and deferring and serving, they're just not in the paper because they're not interesting.
Yeah.
And but going back the other way around, I just want to, you cannot lead if you don't have a sense of your own calling and destiny. Otherwise you will be dysfunctional. You will use people to make yourself feel valuable. So ironically, owning your calling and owning your sense of destiny, owning the power and gifting that's inside of you makes you a healthier leader, because you do not need the applause and affirmation and attention to validate who you are.
Yeah.
You're validated internally, not externally. To me, the most dangerous leader is the person who's completely dependent on external validation.
Yeah. Yep.
And there's something powerful about the person who just knows they can make a difference and they don't need someone else's approval for it.
But how do you think that person can gain confidence in their own calling? That they are so secure that they don't need all this to kind of like beef them up and say, yeah.
I think it's finding your reward in what you do in private and not what you do in public. Like when you feel good about who you are when no one's watching you, you begin to find an internal strength. I remember one time I spoke at a conference called Catalyst, and after I spoke, they had a podcast, and right afterwards, the person interviewing me said, "Erwin, you just spoke at Catalyst, one of the most influential, conferences in the United States. How will you deal with this level of, of success in your life?" And I was really caught off guard by the question. And I said, "I'm sorry, I thought I was successful before I spoke here. I didn't know I wasn't until you told me." That podcast never made it to the light of day. And I said, "You guys say that you have one value system, but you're actually affirming a different one, that our importance is based on us being on the platform. Our importance should be by what we do off the platform. And if we get the platform, it's just simply an extension of what we do off the platform."
That's right, yeah.
And I think that's the thing, is that what you do every day is what builds your confidence, what builds your identity, is what builds your internal strength. And if you're doing what you do every day so that someone else will celebrate you or, applaud for you, you're really just being pulled by the opinions of others.
Yeah.
Wow. But I would say this: you speak better when you have 10,000 people in front of you.
Hey, I'm never going to say it isn't fun.
And not. Hold on, let me rephrase that. It's not that you speak better. You speak in a way that's very different than when you speak with 50 people in front of you.
Right.
So I've seen you do amazing things with 50 people. The room size almost never matters when it comes to like the quality that you bring, but it's a different you. That you likes them sometimes. So how do you manage? Because we have ego, we have image.
To me, it's the same me. But if I spoke to you in this format as if I'm talking to 20,000 people, there'd be just something really weird about it. Intimacy is translated differently based on the number of people in the room. So when you're talking to one person, intimacy is expressed differently. But when I'm talking to 30,000 people, I am actually trying to connect at a deeply intimate human level. But how that intimacy translates in frequency is different in that room. But the best measure of whether I did a great job with those 30,000 people is when people come up to me and go, "I felt like you were only talking to me."
Wow.
And that to me is that's why I say I'm the same person. I'm trying to connect at a deeply intimate, personal, human level, no matter how many people are in the room. But yes, I do change the energy that I bring into that room. Because, you want to kill a room, talk to 30,000 people like you're sitting talking, to one person, and you have to fill that space, with your presence. And that is something really transcendent. And I have to admit, I didn't know that I would be good at that. There was no signs that I would be good at that. I think what actually has made me effective at it is that I am the same person in every room. It's just, I just elevate the octane of me in that room.
Yeah. I have the privilege. I have the privilege of doing this with you. And like today in the car ride, I wish I really wish. I drove so slowly.
I noticed.
Yeah, that's not my usual. Like I drove half the speed.
I was looking at Esther being like, is this normal?
I
This is
wish
80 km.
Yeah, I wish I was driving to Vegas from LA, because the moment in the car was just sacred. If I can use that word, it's just so intimate. And I know you speak to tens of thousands, but how you approach the conversation with us, I just wish that it never ends. And I really can feel, even when I'm listening to your podcast, or when we do the arena, it always sometimes just feels like you are talking to me. I don't care about all the other people in the Zoom. I just like, it was just me. And actually, I want to say this. I've learned so much from you over the last couple of years. I have a big problem. Like when I sit down and listen to you say for 2 hours and you just speak, I just get one thing, like in the beginning, and I'm stuck in that thought. And I'm like, sir, you really shouldn't continue. Like there's nothing else going in. Like I'm still digesting, processing that. And so how did all these thoughts and how you put the words together actually come about in your life? Like, does that make sense? Like it just keep changing the way we think.
Well, I'm glad it feels like I'm the contributor, because I feel like I'm the recipient. Because when people ask me great questions, it makes me think about things I would have never thought about. So like yesterday, we're getting coffee and you start talking about your talk on creativity at the conference coming here at the Collective. And so it immediately provokes some metaphors for me. And, I'm just sharing with you only, to give them away to you if they help you, But then you ask me, well, how do you come up with that? And to me, how I come up with that is I have really brilliant, creative, inventive, imaginative friends who provoke me to think outside of the lines and who force me to explore when I'm trying to help them or serve them or just, explore that idea, their question. So I think if I'm smart at all, it's just because I surround myself with such interesting people that are always asking great questions, and it makes me better, But go ahead, Aaron.
What's a question you love? What's a question that you're asking yourself right now? Both of you. Maybe which one first? Who wants to go first?
What's the question you're asking yourself?
The one question that I keep asking myself recently is, why do people actually find everyday life meaningless? And I think that's the question I want to answer through the Creative Conference, because they just find the grind tough and meaningless, and I don't want to do this anymore. I want to try something else. I really want to know what's really bothering them, or is there something that they didn't see, or how can I help them? That's a big question in my head. And then on the other side is that when they have achieved everything, they say the same thing too. It's actually
Almost
quite...
nothing changes with success.
No, exactly. So success or productivity is not the determining factor for them. Like, you have it, you are lost. You don't have it, you are lost too. Maybe slightly different in terms of wealth, but that's a big question in my head.
It's a big question in my head.
Yeah. I mean, two thoughts come to mind right away. One is like people who are trapped in the meaninglessness of life. Let's say this is how much mundane they have in their life. And so they're overwhelmed by the mundane. And then people who are not trapped by the meaninglessness of life, they don't have this much mundane, they have this much mundane, the exact amount of mundane. The difference is that people who find life meaningful see the beauty in the mundane. And we spend our whole life trying to escape the mundane or avoid the mundane. But people who actually find meaning in life see beauty in the mundane. And I think that's the differential. And the difference between
Yeah.
unsuccessful or pre-successful people who find life meaningless and then post-successful people who find life meaningless, the only difference between them is the pre-successful people still think that the meaning of life is in the success.
Yeah.
And the person who has success has had that delusion destroyed, and now they're even more meaningless.
Wait, so say that last part again. Say it again.
The people who have attained success and still find life meaningless have destroyed the illusion the success gives you meaning, and now they're more meaningless than they were before.
Yeah.
And
So it's actually more serious.
it is a more serious condition, because where do you turn to? At least when you were unsuccessful, you thought the success would fix the problem.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you have all that, you realize it didn't fix the problem. Now I have a bigger problem. Everything that I thought would solve the problem doesn't solve the problem.
So it shocked me, because as a pastor of a church where all of us used to be younger and in university, when they come to me and say, Pastor, I'm lost. Oh, get a degree, work hard, you know, get a good job and buy a house, get a car, marry a wife, find meaning in all these things, right? So it's kind of like I have a solution for them until later on, when people who are successful, they come to me and say, I'm lost. I'm like, why are you lost? Look at you. You've got a good career. You're at the pinnacle of your career. Your house great. Your wife's amazing. Your kids growing. So that's when it shocked me. Firstly, because I was not capable to answer their question or their problem. And secondly, it's, they are still finding life meaningless.
Yeah. Success is not the same as purpose. And
I need to take notes.
without purpose, success is empty. And as trite and simple as it may sound, human beings are designed for service. And when we simply live our lives to accumulate, we actually create a black hole within our souls. But if we can find a way to turn the tide of that and begin to live a life of service, even when you don't know what the future holds and you don't know what you're supposed to do with your life, that service actually brings purpose to your life. And which is why, you know, I'm sure throughout your life you probably wondered, should I be a pastor or should I be an artist? You know, and you just decided to be both. And you know, but you were always a person who's driven towards service.
Yeah.
Even your art is an act of service. And because of that, I don't think you have many days where you wake up going, I don't know if my life has any purpose. You may wonder, should I be more successful?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes you're probably wondering, has my purpose squeezed out my success?
Yeah.
And what you have to realize is, oh no, you found what people fighting for success, hope is on the other side of it, purpose.
Yeah.
So now you're actually free to be as successful as you want because you're not owned by it. So I think now you can aspire and strive to be as successful as you want to be and not worry about what other people think or say.
Yeah.
Because you have already found your purpose. Now you're just enjoying the success that you can work toward.
Yeah. Wow.
Which is so fulfilling. I think anyone who's ever done something like big knows that doing the big thing isn't what actually makes you happy. It's fighting to do the big thing.
Oh, yes.
That makes you happy.
Yes. Yeah.
It's actually like the fight that is exhilarating. That's what gets your adrenaline going. That's what wakes you up in the morning. The win is not as exhilarating as the fight to the win.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. This is like really scary because it feels like it's a conversation that I have with my wife.
Who's off camera over there, who should be on this,
Right.
honestly.
And it's like, that's how what we talk about like all the time. Like, should we be more successful? Will it look bad on us?
Will it look bad on us?
Yeah, will it look bad on us? Are we
It will look bad on you in the eyes of everyone who isn't for you.
Yeah.
Sometimes the greatest gift success gives you is clarifies who's actually for you.
Can I push back a little bit? You weren't done though. Can you finish? Do you want to finish that statement?
I'm good.
Okay, I want to push back because even we had that conversation when I bought a nice car. I told you I want to buy a nice car, and then I bought a nice car. And the funny thing, because once I bought the car, I don't care about the car. The car's fun.
You needed to achieve that though.
I felt like I needed to, and then now I feel like I'm stupid for feeling like I needed to do that.
No, because what you're realizing is achieving it was actually what was fun. Having it isn't that fun at all.
Exactly. Right?
Having it's fun sometimes.
All right.
Yeah.
But I have to remind myself because I actually don't drive that much. I drive every day for function. But we were talking about this. It was like I have such low mileage in my car because I only go 1 mile to the office, 1 mile to my family's house, 1 mile to my niece, 1 mile home. I go 5 miles. I've driven it like 10,000 miles under what I'm supposed to in a year. Yeah. And we were talking about it. Getting the thing isn't as fun as trying to achieve the thing or as meaningful. But there were people who said, "What are people going to think when you get it?" Right? Like even mom said, "What are people going to think of you that you?" So I think she's for me. But there is that second, maybe that second perspective or third perspective that goes, well, be careful of what everyone else thinks. And so how important is that? Because I do think there's some health, because I don't think mom's doing it in a bad way.
No, I just think it's the curse of church.
Right, okay. So, but how important is that? Is that humility, or that awareness?
Yeah.
Right. So don't be unaware of success. But then there's people, then we have our, in context, like, I don't know if Paulo's like thinking about his plane like that. You know what I mean? Like my car costs one panel of that plane.
Yeah, it's funny.
Like literally,
one screw off the wheel.
We were talking about a panel.
Our friends with real wealth never think twice about whether they should have that much wealth or buy those things.
That's right.
It's
broken
all of
in
us.
us?
It's all of us who are like in that. We're not poor, but we're not rich.
Yeah.
It's in that in between space. You're going, oh, should I or should I or should I? And to me, Aaron, like the thing is, I would harass you a lot about the car.
Why?
When you wanted it.
Yeah.
But not because of what people would say, but because of what you wanted. I'm saying, hey, I just want you to be okay.
You didn't like that I wanted the thing. And then because I wanted the thing, you actually in turn didn't want the thing that you wanted. Because you wanted a new car.
Because, and you were trying to get me to get something where I said, hey, I've already done that. Like, so it doesn't have the same magnetic pull to me. But I want you to feel free to let those things be valuable to you as they inspire you and add meaning or beauty to your life.
We're talking about something very shallow right now, but I think
there's actually a car. No, but it's a good question.
Yeah, I think there's an interesting caveat behind it or meaning behind it. But there is something broken in us a little bit, I will say, right? Because
all of us.
Because for everyone else, I don't think anyone else thinks like
No.
that. I think it's kind of people who grow up inside of the church or maybe lead.
It's a poverty mindset.
No, but
in a lot of ways, it is. No,
Yeah.
And,
you think so?
And your mom grew up very, very poor.
I didn't grow up. I mean, we grew up.
You didn't grow up poor like your mom, though.
No, not like mom, but
and so it is a
the
poverty
East
mindset.
LA version.
But for me, it's the opposite. The moment somebody goes, "Oh, you need to be careful what people think of you," I'm going, "Go buy the car." Like, who cares what people think of you? Because the people who are for you are going to celebrate that huge win in your life. And it's always nice to have markers when you go, oh, I know who's on my team. I know who's for me, and it's just one of those, you just have to live your life.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually think because of my stage of life too, a huge part of the thing I try to do is even with people like you, Kevin, going, Kevin, you actually deserve more than you think. And you got to stop worrying about what other people think. If you have the capacity to create more and generate more, just go do it.
Yeah.
And if you go, well, yeah, but I'm not comfortable with having this much, then give it away. But just don't generate less.
Yeah.
Just be more generative and more generous. The solution we have most of the time is, I just won't be generative. Let the solution be, I'll just be more generous.
Yeah.
So how do we trick our brains? Because I don't.
How do we trick our
How do we trick our
brain?
brains? 'Cause I was on a call last week with a guy from the arena, JC, who I think it's fine because a lot of people have JC as the initial. But we were talking about this conversation about he's like, I undervalue my product. He go, he's like, I feel like I have a very fair price point for what I do. And I was actually talking about this with your wife yesterday about because he's doing coaching and consulting in a really niche market, and he brings a great product. He's a really smart man, and he's like, how do I not feel awkward about selling the thing? And he's like, I know the thing works, but how do I not feel awkward about it? So, and I gave him the best answer I could, but there's something in us, right? And he said the same thing. He's like, I grew up a pastor's kid in the same space.
Yeah.
I have a really hard time stepping into the value that I bring. Austin is back in LA with all of our cameras, and I sprung this on you guys last minute, and my camera died. So I am now the narrator, and I'm Morgan Freeman of this podcast. You won't see me, but I'm the voice of God for the podcast. So I was asking the question of, it feels like as people who have led in a spiritual way in churches, you guys are active pastors. I'm a retired man, but we tend to undervalue ourselves. But I think people just do that in the marketplace. We undervalue the product that we bring or the value that we bring. So how do we? And I know we've had this argument forever, and I have to go find out from other people how much other people charge for speaking events.
Yeah.
Because I know you're undervalued.
Yeah.
And then, when all those documents got leaked in the paper, then you found out you were undervalued.
Yeah, dramatically.
Which was fine because it made you look better, not bad.
Yeah.
But I think that you don't charge enough for your paintings, and your paintings are phenomenal. And I know that I don't charge you enough to I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
To run everything we do.
No. But so how do you manage your value? How do you know if you're undervaluing yourself, and how do you bring healthy value to that process?
Well, so you're the least expensive CEO in the world.
No, that's not true.
But I think some of it is to ask yourself a practical question. When I first started writing books, I would get so many emails from people saying, I can't afford your book. Can you please send it to me for free? And I would feel so terrible. Until one day I realized, well, I didn't realize, somebody said to me, Erwin, that person won't invest $25 in their own life. What do you think you sending them a free book will do for them?
True.
That more than your book, they have the commitment to spend the money to make themselves better will have a greater impact than all the content in your book.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we undervalue ourselves because we forget that we created something that helps other people. But it only helps other people when they're willing to pay the price for the process.
Yeah.
And I know it's a cliche, but someone said this statement that I was really interested. They don't, if they don't pay, they don't pay attention.
Oh yeah.
And I thought, that's really an interesting point. And I had a hard time with that, and realized the people I gave my books to, almost none of them ever read it. The people who bought it are the ones who read it.
That's right.
And when you spend your life creating something of value, what you charge for it actually communicates to the customer what value you place on what you've created. So if everything you create is, the 99-cent store, that's how it'll be valued in the world. And if that's what you're creating, then charge 99 cents.
Yep.
But if you're creating something that has years and years and years of teaching and learning and experience, and you've paid the price of sweat and blood and tears and failure and success, and you've created something for people, you should value it at a level where it respects what you've created, so that the person in the world knows the value of the content. They can decide, I'm ready for this level of personal commitment in my life.
Yeah.
And, so for years, I paid an immense amount of money to be a member of TED.
Yeah.
Because I valued learning at that level so much that I didn't even blink an eye. Just pay the tuition. I'm a member of TED, and I did it for probably 20 years.
Right.
And I think you are telling people who this product is for.
There's something
by
there.
what you charge.
By what you charge.
Yeah.
I cut you off at the end, but there's something there, because even when you made $12,000 a year working at what was before Mosaic, a little church in East Los Angeles, you would spend $1,000 on a training that and then you would show everybody that training, and you really didn't had this sense that you knew you needed to invest in your education and yourself. What? That's crazy. That's 1/12 of your income. That's actually crazy.
I bought 2 videos that were $1,000 a piece. when I was in like 29 to 31 years old that were rare. And when you buy them, you license them. And I would use them over and over again to train people.
Yeah.
Because I felt like these videos translated certain concepts and ideas in a way that was better than the way I could do it without them.
Right. So, but talk to me about that ideology. What clicked? Like, how did you? Because I think that's maybe the thing that took you from a poverty mindset to being able to generate wealth.
Yeah, I just told myself I'd rather not eat and learn. Like for me, learning was more important than eating. Like accessing insight and knowledge and mentoring at the highest level, I would pay anything for it. I would rather have that than clothes. I'd rather have that than a car. So early on, I don't know how, but I definitely connected to this mindset. Everything I pour into myself will come back to me one day, and I can give to the world at a deeper level. And so I was a voracious reader. I bought more. While people were buying hamburgers, I was buying books. And I was reading massive amount of books every single day. I had 40 periodicals that would come to my office on Monday morning that I had a subscription to. And I would go through all those magazines, periodicals every single week, downloading massive amount of information. I just told myself, learn voraciously and you'll have more to give to the world. And that's the mindset that I'm looking for in the world. Those are the people I want to invest in.
Yeah.
The people who would rather learn than eat. They would rather access world-class information to grow than to buy a new pair of shoes or clothes. So I think it's that essential in life.
But I've also heard you not recommend that to other people. You say if it takes food off your table, then don't buy the arena.
Because I don't expect them.
I'm not trying to call you out.
No, you're right.
But
I do say that. Don't take food off your table.
Dang it. I really wish we had another camera. We're going to have to do this. We're going to have to find another camera at some point because I want to lead us to this point is what we were talking about when we were leaving the car is that the things that you expect of yourself, you do not expect of other people.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
That's the conversation we were going to have today.
Right.
And I couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
We started.
I don't expect the level of sacrifice and an insane commitment to personal growth and from other people than I demand of myself.
But that's because you don't impose on others. You want people to decide for themselves.
Yeah, it's true. You can't make someone else hungry.
No.
And you can't make someone else desperate.
Yep.
And when you can find that, you find the right person to invest in.
I have a different darkness in me sometimes. I'm like, yes, you can starve them. But we're not going to go into that. That's a different podcast. That's the Shadow Podcast. Okay, so I think we have the prompt for our next podcast, the topic for our next podcast. So we'll have to come back maybe at some point this week and lock you down and talk about this idea of expectations and how do we maybe set healthy expectations and standards around the people around us and share the burden of leadership.
Yeah.
Kevin, can we get you back?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
All right. And next time we'll have a camera that's on you the whole time.
Yeah, it's my bad. I didn't bring a charger.
Austin, we miss you.
We do.
Yeah, we miss you, Austin.
We'll see you next episode. All right.
All right.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
See ya.